wairua to a home. It's very, very... Whether or not you believe in ghosts, it is important, isn't it?
The spirit is a real thing. Whatever your faith, whatever your religiosity, we all know that there's a sense of something about life itself that is the spiritual wairua, whether we use that word, and to pay homage to it, I think, is a healthy way to live in the world.
Very, very good. Well, on a final note, it seems like it's goodbye to Marie Kondo and goodbye to decluttering. Welcome to Cluttercore, or the pandemic trend of celebrating stuff and comfort, where every object sparks joy. Gone is the clinical look, and let's open our arms to a mantelpiece of mementos. Organised clutter on coffee tables and wall paintings sandwiched together. All this from an article by Morwenna Ferrier in The Garden, which she said stems from the Victorian habit of acquisition and display. So, who wants to start? I can imagine you would live yourself in a life of wonderful cluttered Chester with all the paintbrushes and I don't know.
Certain rooms of the house. Actually, I was thinking about this because we took over a house a couple of years ago and it doesn't have a mantelpiece. And it looks really stark. There's sort of nowhere to put your stuff. And so it just seems really unusual. I've been wondering how I can go about constructing one. It's sort of got a freestanding wood burner, so there's no need to have a mantelpiece over a fireplace. And I feel a bit lost with that.
Buy yourself a false fire front.
I might have to do something like that,
And then put
Ella.
a fabulous poster of, I don't know, Marilyn Monroe and where the fire would be.
Well, I've got an Ella at home who may not think that's a fantastic idea, Ella.
That is so relatable to me when we took our fireplace out and the mantelpiece had gone. But where did you put the family photos and that type of thing? What about you, Ella? I mean, a whole movement dedicated to organised clutter, and we're not talking hoarding here. Just that maximal style. What do you reckon?
Well, it's really gratifying to know that after 50 years, my home decorating style has come back into fashion.
So you were never a big fan of that minimal style of...
I never got to declutter. But I have had children for the last 35 years wandering around and leaving things in the garage and the spare room and eventually telling me it's an artwork that belongs to me now. So, clutter may well be my middle name.
Yeah. It's one psychologist, Chester, called clutter a living archive of memory. You know, it's a nice way to describe it, isn't it? We want those mementos around us. We want those pictures of family gone by and that type of thing.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I just can't think of the phrase that people use from the Nordic countries where when people get old, they start sort of decluttering, getting down to sort of minimalist. And I just don't get that. I grew up with grandparents, for instance, who had, a huge rogues gallery all over the dining room wall of Who's Who in the zoo and all the rest of it, prized mementos, and I actually like that sort of stuff.
Wonderful. Catherine says, Wallace, the Garden to Table program currently offers around 15,000 children food education, which Ella alluded to. So we might talk about Garden to Table a little bit later in the week, perhaps.
They do fabulous work. I think they do absolutely wonderful work.
Ella Henry, Chester Burrows, thank you very much for being on the panel this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Kia ora.
I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow, 3:45. Checkpoint is next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, health authorities confirm a major COVID outbreak in a Christchurch isolation facility. The police investigate sexual assault allegations against several Wellington musicians, but say the associated social media storm must stop. Leakers, coups and backbiting aside, National puts on a public show of unity after its post-election post-mortem. And it's haere rā and a silver tray for their service as the party farewell a big chunk of its MPs. And speaking of politics, who's in line to be our next Deputy Prime Minister? And the US charges Russian military officers over a high-profile cybercrime.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. 11 cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed at a managed isolation facility in Christchurch, where more than 100 Russian fishing crew are staying. The Ministry of Health say it is also investigating another 14 cases there. All were detected during routine Day 3 testing. Maritime Union General Secretary Joe Fleetwood says workers, including fishermen, should be screened for COVID before arriving to prevent such situations.
It's not a surprise, really. The question should be asked, are the foreign seafarers, fishermen, are they being tested prior to leaving their own country and going into isolation in their own country? That should be the catch.
The ministry says the seamen are the only ones in the isolation hotel. Seafood New Zealand says all the men were tested before they flew here. The police expect more people to come forward as part of an operation investigating historic sexual assault allegations in the Wellington region. Operation Emerald began yesterday after a flood of allegations emerged on social media against 3 Wellington musicians. They were accused of rape, sexual assault and other violent acts. The police say they have received a small number of complaints directly today. Detective Senior Sergeant John van der Heuvel says would not say how many people are being investigated and that it is too early to say if charges will be laid.
Let's move this investigation from social media, bring it to police, bring it to the support services that can actually help, and we will move forward from there.
John van der Heuvel says a team of about 12 detectives are working on the case. The National Party leader Judith Collins is hoping that her caucus will now stop leaking following the party's crushing election defeat. The party held a caucus meeting today. Ms Collins says her team is very focused and thinks there is not going to be any more leaks.
What I think it's really clear is that everyone has to work really well together. So obviously detailed discussions in caucus stay exactly there, and I'm very positive that we are going to have a very, very good caucus and we are going to be a very strong opposition.
Judith Collins says the party will also hold a review into the last term of opposition and the election campaign. South Australia is joining New South Wales and Northern Territory in opening its borders to New Zealanders. The state's Police Commissioner Grant Stevens has announced the move with immediate effect. 12 recent arrivals from New Zealand who are already in hotel quarantine in South Australia will now be let out. Mr Stevens says the state is now happy to receive direct flights from New Zealand. The Samoan and seasonal worker community in Hawke's Bay are reeling after the death of one of their own in a horror crash yesterday. 37-year-old Tino Tangi'ilima died in a crash between a van and truck on the Napier Taupo Road. Assemblies of God King's House Church minister Ai Laulau Fale-Tutulu says a prayer meeting was held last night for the man's colleagues. He says the men may take some time off work and will be supported by families in Hawke's Bay as their own are in Samoa. Their role is to help the men who were traumatised by the crash.
Be that person said, let them know that we care, and anything that we can do for them while they are in this state of mind, that's all we can do for now.
Minister Ai Laulau Fale-Tutulu of Napier. The GCSB won't comment on its potential involvement in a US investigation that's led to 6 Russian military intelligence officers being charged over high-profile cyber attacks. The US Justice Department name-dropped New Zealand as one of the governments that provided assistance in the investigation. The GCSB says agencies here continue to work with overseas security partners to deter and disrupt malicious cyber activity when it's in New Zealand's national security interests to do so. However, it won't comment on the specifics of this investigation. It's 4 minutes past 5. 2 uncapped newcomers have been named in the All Blacks squad to travel to Australia. Wellington loose forward Du Plessis-Kirifi and Otago prop George Bauer are part of the 36-strong group flying out on Sunday. Both come in as injury cover, with starting prop Joe Moody still going through concussion protocols, and the pair of loose forwards Adi Savea and prop Nepo Laulala on paternity leave. Meanwhile, Tony Brown says this time he's ready to be head coach of the Highlanders. An assistant coach with the Highlanders this season and from 2014 to 2016, the former All Blacks first 5 reluctantly took charge in 2017. Brown feels he's developed a lot since then and says taking the job again is a combination of wanting to do it and the Highlanders asking him to do it.
I felt as though we made some real good progress post-COVID and we were heading in the right direction. And, for me, it would be a shame if someone came in and changed everything we were doing. So logical for myself to step up and take over the reins and try and continue to push forward with what we were doing. And
Tony Brown will still remain as assistant coach with Japan and will return to the Brave Blossoms full-time ahead of the 2023 World Cup. The Silver Ferns defender Michaela Sokolic-Beatson is out of the team's domestic matches this week after rupturing an Achilles tendon for the second time in just 9 months. The 24-year-old, who ruptured her right Achilles in January, has suffered the same injury to her left leg at training last night. That's the news.
Hawke's Bay Samoan community in deep shock after a fatal crash.
It's an awful blow for the community and their family in Samoa. It's a difficult situation knowing that no one can come and no one can go.
Some farewells for national MPs.
We're going to be saying goodbye to some really decent, nice, capable people.
You have to take it on the chin.
And success for 18-year-old netballer Grace Weke after tough beginnings.
Whoa, I've just got myself a silver fern. She comes the following week, couldn't catch, couldn't jump, couldn't do anything.
Always in play. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland south to Waitomo, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine in Northland. Cloudy with areas of light rain or drizzle in Waitomo, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Spreading north to Auckland and Coromandel tonight. Becoming mainly fine by midday tomorrow with scattered showers inland during the afternoon and evening. Taranaki, central North Island high country and Gisborne through to Wairarapa. Cloudy with areas of drizzle or light rain. Wanganui to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland except Stewart Island, mainly fine, but areas of low cloud and drizzle near the east coast until midday tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, fine weather. Stewart Island and Fiordland, cloudy periods with a few showers. Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods, the odd shower possible overnight tonight. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Russian fishing crews believed to be at the centre of a COVID outbreak at an isolation facility all tested negative and spent 14 days isolating in their own homes before boarding a charter flight here, according to one of the companies employing them. The Ministry of Health has confirmed that 11 people have tested positive for the virus at the Sedema Hotel in Christchurch, and 14 other cases are under investigation after routine Day 3 testing. It's understood that Russian and Ukrainian fishing crews who arrived in the country last Friday are the only guests at the hotel that's currently locked down. Sealord is one of 3 companies that brought the replacement deep sea fishing crews to New Zealand. I asked Chief Executive Doug Paulin what he'd been told about the situation.
Kia ora, Lisa. At this stage, we only know what's been reported via the media. So we haven't been officially contacted by the Ministry of Health nor MIQ. However, I imagine that will take place in the near future.
Does it surprise you that they haven't been on the blower? These are your workers, aren't they?
No, I don't think so, because they'll have a protocol and a process that they need to follow. And I think the most positive thing that we can take out of this is our border protection at work. And they'll be following a very regimented process and protocol, which will be around ensuring that the individuals themselves are managed and that they are looking at how they will progress forward in that particular facility. So all of the care will go to that rather than dealing with the fishing companies, and they'll get to us when it makes sense to get to us.
So how many of your workers are in that hotel?
So we have approximately 110 of our crew that will be in that managed facility, and at some point in the future there will be more coming in.
So can you give us a bit of background information? When did these crew come in, and was the plane a charter? Where did it originate from?
These crew are fishermen who typically we bring into the country every 6 months. So one crew goes out and another crew comes in. COVID-19 interrupted that cycle, and the prior crew had been in New Zealand for a year, and we had just received approval to bring in the new crew, and they arrived at the very start of October. I think it would have been about the 7th or 8th. However, I'd have to go and confirm what date they actually landed. They've all come in on a private charter flight from Russia.
Did that plane stop anywhere, and was there anyone else on the plane besides the air crew and your crew?
So no one else on the plane other than fishermen, and they would have had to transit through another port, likely Singapore, because obviously there's refuelling required, but there is no getting off or on the plane for anyone else at that particular point in time. So at all parts of the charter, obviously you're trying to limit the amount of contact that anyone's going to have with any other personnel. So the people that are in that managed facility all travelled together.
Have you spoken to any of them today?
No, not as of yet, because it's very difficult for us to get access to the crew. So we've only just recently heard about it via the media reports. We've got our Russian-speaking employee who is in contact. But as you can imagine, the facility themselves, the Ministry of Health and the MIQ officials are dedicating themselves to making sure that they do what they're supposed to do based on the protocols. And as I say, dealing with the fishing companies, who are all in whatever area they are, safe and sound, will not be deemed important until there comes a point in time they want to talk to us.
So these fishing crews are mainly from Russia, as I understand it, and Russia's got the fourth highest number of COVID cases, more than 1.3 million cases. What requirements or health requirements were there for these crew members leading up to getting on the plane? Were they tested? How did it work?
Yeah, so they have an isolation period prior to getting on the plane. So they're required to isolate in their homes for 14 days prior to getting on the plane. That itself, of course, doesn't mean they won't get COVID-19, but it's a process we can put in place. They're all tested 3 days before getting on the plane, at which point in time, if anyone is shown to be positive, they, of course, are not able to join the charter flight. And then we have the New Zealand process, which is being well managed by MIQ, where they obviously get off the plane, they're transited immediately to the facility, they then go into managed isolation, and the border protection, as it is for anyone coming into New Zealand, manages all of those individuals. And then when there is a positive case, they'll just be managed as per the protocols for anyone else who's shown to have COVID-19 coming into the country. So, an endorsement for the process that the New Zealand government have put in place, and exactly why it's there to keep our borders protected from COVID-19 being in the community.
When is the next plane of crew due?
Well, it'll now depend on the facility, if there are indeed cases of COVID-19, which, given your reports, I expect that to be the case. And we'll just have to go and then review what does that mean for the timeline. Will that push it out? And if there's delays required, then we'll just manage accordingly.
Do you regret bringing them over, given how this is playing out?
No, absolutely not. This is a significant economic issue for both, not only the fishing companies themselves, it would have been to a raft of other companies across New Zealand. And this shows that what we can do is bring people into New Zealand, into managed isolation. We can then find cases of COVID-19, and then as we've done across multiple months now, we can manage those cases.
Can you not do without these
protocols and processes?
Doug, sorry to interrupt. Can you not do without these workers? Are there no Kiwi workers who can do the jobs that these people are going to?
No, there are no Kiwi workers that can do these jobs. So this is, some of these fishermen have been fishing for 25 years. They have qualifications which take many, many years to receive. And at this point in time, there are not enough New Zealanders who actually have those qualifications to do those roles. So if you were to look at replacing them, it would take a very long period of time. And even at the lowest level, where people are unqualified, that we take to sea and then we train them at sea, I, as we speak, have got between 30 and 40 vacancies on my fishing vessels. And we have a significant recruitment program right across New Zealand, and yet I still can't fill them.
Doug, you are covering the costs of bringing them in, right?
That's right.
So what happens if they need further health care? Who covers that?
Of course, any additional cost in the management of the cases will be borne by the fishing companies, not the New Zealand taxpayer. And that's been well understood by all of the fishing companies and by the Ministry of Health and MIQ.
Given that you have a regime where they had to isolate at home for 14 days, get tested before they get on the plane, and it seems somehow they have managed to become infected with COVID, are you going to do a review of how things work at the Russian end? Because how sure are you that they stuck to the rules?
Well, look, you can never be 100% sure. And look, that's the same in any country across the world when you look at what's happening in Australia, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in America. At the end of the day, there is got to be individual accountability to following the rules. So you're never really going to be able to 100% police that. We will, of course, review our procedures and say, look, is there anything we missed or could we add to help ensure it? But what New Zealand has done in putting in such positive actions in regards to how we manage people returning to New Zealand just shows it's the right thing to do. And we're confident that between the Ministry of Health, MIQ, and other companies, not only the fishing companies, we can manage COVID-19 in regards to people coming into the country.
And that was Sea Lord Chief Executive Doug Paulin. Our reporter Sally Murphy is outside the Sedema Hotel in Christchurch. Kia ora, Sally. What do we know is happening at the hotel as the result of this outbreak?
Well, what we've heard is that the hotel behind me, the Sedema, which is right next door to Christchurch Airport, is actually in lockdown. It doesn't look any different to what it has looked like in the last few months. There's a police car here monitoring activity, and there's the fences behind me, which are for outdoor activity for the people quarantined inside. We've spoken to the hotel, and they say that staff have no contact with the crew that are staying there, and they're confident that all measures are being put in place to keep staff safe.
Any word from the Ministry of Health?
Yes, the Ministry says that the people that have tested positive are now going to be separated from the rest of the group, but still within the same hotel. So they'll still all be quarantining here, which they're going to do so for 2 weeks after they arrived in Christchurch last Friday.
Thanks, Sally. That is Sally Murphy, who is outside the Sedema Hotel in Christchurch. If you're just joining us, that is where there has been 11 people confirmed as testing positive for COVID-19, and there are 14 other cases under investigation. That's after routine day 3 testing. And it is a group of deep sea fishing crews who have come here from Russia and the Ukraine. Now, Checkpoint requested interviews with the Minister in charge of Managed Isolation, Megan Woods, the DG of Health, Dr Ashley Bloomfield, the Minister for Health, Chris Hipkins, the Operations Manager for Managed Isolation, Air Commodore Webb, and also the boss of the Sedema Hotel. All of them declined. It is 18 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on this one. What do you think? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. National Party MPs have emerged from their first post-election caucus with a public show of unity after its disastrous result. Their numbers were slashed from 54 to 35 and could go even lower after special votes are counted. This morning, the surviving MPs farewelled their former colleagues with emotions running high. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, filed this report.
Good afternoon, everybody. We've had our first caucus following the election.
It was not the return to Parliament many National MPs expected or even believed possible in the run-up to election night. Surrounded by the whole team, leader Judith Collins fronted to the media after the meeting that went on for several hours.
Very sad, actually, because we've farewelled so many caucus members, including those who intended to leave and those who didn't intend to leave.
The party's numbers have been gutted, as has morale.
It's been a bit rough. The tide went out, and today's going to be a tough day, obviously.
It's going to be very sad to see the departure of many great MPs and colleagues and friends.
It was a horrible outcome.
What are you going to say to the caucus in your farewell speech?
I'm going to be very positive and wish everybody well.
Ms Collins has called for caucus discipline, blaming some of National's loss of support on the leaking of an email critical of her from MP Denise Lee. MPs now left with the job of rebuilding the party agree.
That's something that I'm really angry about. I just think that, people, New Zealanders would be very disappointed at us.
I anticipate there'll be a pretty robust conversation in caucus today.
I think that sort of behaviour is extraordinary and don't understand it myself, and I have no time for it.
Quite frankly, I'm disappointed with the leaks that have happened. It shouldn't happen. Anything that needs to be said should be able to be said within our caucus environment, and we should be able to trust our team.
I blame the culture of leaking that's besetted this whole time as a real problem for our caucus, and I've never quite seen anything like it, really.
Just stop it, shape up, get out.
Denise Lee, whose email was critical of the leadership, was asked to comment on the fallout.
No, I definitely don't. We are, as Judith has said, going through an internal review, and all my comments, as they have been the whole time, will be reserved for closed doors.
Ms Collins was asked whether the pre-campaign leaks had been addressed during the caucus meeting.
I don't think we're going to be having any issues because I think we're very focused. I hope we're not going to have any issues.
Under the rules, the National Caucus has to appoint a leader as soon as practicably possible after the election, which means after the final results on November the 6th. Ms Collins minced no words when asked if she had the backing of the caucus.
Yes.
And why is she so confident?
I just think everyone's very focused. We're such good quality people here. I think we're just going to find that everyone's really occupied doing their jobs of not only looking after their electorates but actually very focused on making sure we hold the government to account.
Former leader Simon Bridges was asked if the caucus is united.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely is. I think it's a very clear coming behind Judith.
Was there any discussions though about the leadership?
Oh look, no, not on the issue of who is the leader. I mean, I think it was a caucus meeting that was not for me to go into the details. Was the various members of Parliament who said we're sad to see going, both by choice and those who because of the result are going, and discussion about the review process and so on.
MPs were asked whether Judith Collins has the full backing of the caucus.
I think that certainly most of us are very united behind the leadership, and I think she did an extraordinary job of a very difficult situation.
100% behind Judith.
Judith had a very, very short time with which to actually pick us up, and I admired every day. She went out with a smile on her face.
They have to remain united and follow the leader.
You think everyone is following the leader?
They have to. No other option.
Ms Collins intends to wait until the final results of the election are announced in November and until the government's ministerial lineup is confirmed before allocating roles and responsibilities to her own MPs. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Are investigating multiple accusations of sexual assault against several Wellington musicians. One woman who spoke out online about the musicians' alleged behaviour says she got dozens of responses from women, men and minors describing similar attacks. Those making the accusations allowed her to share their experiences, provided their identities remained anonymous. But police are now urging the social media storm around the situation to stop. Detective Inspector John van der Heuvel spoke to the media a short time ago.
Yesterday, police commenced an investigation upon becoming aware of social media commentary in regard to allegations of historic sexual assaults occurring in Wellington by subjects who have been named on various social media platforms. Today, we have received a small number of complaints directly, and these are currently under investigation. We know that coming forward to report a sexual assault can be incredibly difficult. However, I want to reassure the Wellington community that we treat these reports extremely seriously and will ensure appropriate support is provided to anyone coming forward. While we understand the concerns of the community in regard to this matter, we ask people to refrain from using social media to name individuals or post any personal details of people suspected of being involved, as this could incorrectly and unfairly target the wrong people and also have a negative impact on the police investigation. Anyone who has information that may assist our ongoing inquiries is asked to contact Wellington Police directly on 105 and make reference to Operation Emerald. We will treat your call with sensitivity and investigate thoroughly.
And that is Detective Inspector John Vanden Heuvel. And our reporter Harry Locke has been following this story, and he joins me now from our Wellington studio. Harry, what can you tell us about how these accusations came to light?
Well, Lisa, it all began 2 days ago, and that was when one woman started posting about the behaviour of these individuals on social media. And basically that triggered a whole number of complaints and accusations about these people to come through to her privately. And she would then ask these individuals who made these accusations whether she could repost them on social media. And so what happened is we had this whole series of posts which basically outlined a whole number of accusations, and there were some really serious accusations of sexual assault in there. I won't go into the details of them, but the person who was posting these says that she was inundated with responses, that she had over 100 of them, and they weren't all from survivors of their experiences. There were also messages of support in there.
And so what are the police doing now?
Well, yesterday, in response to becoming aware of the social media posts, they launched an investigation. And since then, they have received a small number of complaints directly. But when asked at the police media briefing, which we just heard from at 4 o'clock, the Detective Inspector John Vanden Heuvel wouldn't say how many complaints had been made, nor of their exact nature, though he did say that they were of a sexual nature. But he is expecting more complaints to come through in the coming days. He also wouldn't say how far back these complaints date to. He was also asked if the individuals are known to the police, and he wouldn't comment on that. He says that they are going through their reports to find out if they have been identified or dealt with by the police in the past. But a dozen investigators are now working on it, and that could be scaled up depending on the number of complaints and the scale of the complaint size. But there were really two messages from the police in that briefing, and one was for survivors to trust the police and to come forward and to bring their story to them, and the second was to take it offline, to stop using social media as the grounds for making accusations against these individuals.
Yeah, and in saying that, what about community action?
Well, a meeting was organised this afternoon with the police, but it was organised by the Wellington City Councillor Tamitha Paul. In attendance was also Louise Nicholas, a rape survivor and advocate, as well as a number of Wellington-based organisations that provide services for sexual assault survivors. They were the Wellington Rape Crisis, Wellington Help Sexual Abuse Prevention Network and Mosaic. Actually, after the police briefing, Louise Nicholas made a short statement on behalf of the survivors who were in attendance at that meeting also, and she said that their message was also to trust the police, trust that it is safe to go to the police, to make a complaint with them, and for that to be seen through.
Thank you, Harry. That's our reporter in Wellington, Harry Locke. And a reminder, if you're a survivor of sexual assault, you can find help at Rape Crisis, Help, or you can call the National Sexual Harm Helpline, Safe to Talk, on 0800 044 334. And I'll give that number again, 0800 044 334. 6 Russian military intelligence officers have been charged by the US for their part in masterminding a series of high-profile global cyber attacks targeting foreign companies, governments and critical infrastructure and even the Olympic Games. The US Justice Department says the computer hackers are responsible for the most disruptive and destructive series of attacks ever known. And authorities here in New Zealand appear to have helped with the US Justice Department's years-long investigation. Here's our reporter, Sarah Robson.
The US Assistant Attorney General for National Security, John Demers, says no country has weaponised its cyber capabilities as maliciously as Russia. In their cyber attacks, the hackers managed to cause power blackouts in Ukraine, disrupt the 2018 Winter Olympics, and interfere with the French elections in 2017. In June that year, they unleashed the NotPetya ransomware attack, which infected computers around the world, crippling critical infrastructure and resulting in billions of dollars in losses, as tech expert Paul Brislin explains.
It affected businesses all around the planet, including, most notably, probably the Danish shipping company, Moller Maersk, who were completely locked out of their IT system for quite some time. And it disrupted shipping and communication all around the planet for them.
Paul Brislin says it was a logistical nightmare for Maersk.
They couldn't say what was on any particular container. They couldn't say which containers were on any particular ship. It was very much down to a manual backup process. And when you're running a global operation like that, so much of it is digitized these days that turning back to a manual paper-based process and just phoning people on ships by satellite phones, that really doesn't work terribly well.
In February 2018, the GCSB was among the international agencies to condemn the NotPetya attack and point the blame at the Russian government. Announcing the charges today, the US Justice Department said it had significant cooperation and assistance from a number of governments, foreign authorities and intelligence agencies. New Zealand was name-dropped on the list. The minister responsible for New Zealand's spy agencies, Andrew Little, couldn't say exactly what New Zealand's involvement in the investigation was.
It's a very sort of scant reference to New Zealand. There are a number of New Zealand authorities that would assist in something like this. Look, we know that cyber threats and cyber security issues dominate around the world. We will have assisted in some way, but it's not quite clear what that assistance is in this case.
IT security expert Daniel Ayres says there are a number of ways New Zealand could have assisted.
That could have been support through the GCSB in terms of either intelligence gathering or if there were any victims here in New Zealand, passing information on. Or it could have been other government agencies who were either victims or targets.
In a statement, the GCSB said it doesn't comment about specific matters which are subject to proceedings in the jurisdictions of its overseas partners. The police referred any questions about their possible involvement to the US Justice Department. Despite the charges being laid, Daniel Ayres doubts the hackers will ever see the inside of an American courtroom.
But it does send a message that the Americans are tracking and are able to identify these people and know what they're up to, and I suspect that that's intended to serve as a disincentive for state-sponsored actors who don't like that sort of attention.
The US Justice Department says the hackers used some of the world's most destructive malware in their attacks. They have been charged with conspiracy, computer hacking, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft and false registration of a domain name. The likes of Google, Facebook and Twitter also provided assistance in the investigation. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the Deputy Prime Minister's job is up for grabs, so who's in the mix? National says haere rā to a big chunk of its caucus who leave with a silver platter to begin the job hunt. And President Trump launches a scathing attack on his top infectious disease expert, calling him an idiot and a disaster. We would love your feedback. What do you make of the COVID outbreak and managed isolation that appears to be among imported workers who are going to fishing boats here? And also on the National Party's post-election post-mortem. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susana.
11 cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed at a managed isolation facility in Christchurch, where more than 100 Russian seamen are staying. The Ministry of Health says it is also investigating another 14 cases there. Sea Lord is one of the companies bringing in the workers, and its chief executive Doug Paulin told Checkpoint they expect to halt further flights, which were going to see more workers brought in. The police expect more people to come forward as part of an operation investigating historic sexual assault allegations in Wellington. Operation Emerald began yesterday after a flood of allegations emerged on social media against 3 Wellington musicians. They were accused of rape, sexual assault and other violent acts. The National Party leader has emerged from a post-election caucus confident she has the backing of her whole team. MPs returned to Parliament today, where 15 of them were farewelled following the crushing election defeat. Judith Collins says she believes, or at least hopes, there won't be any more leaks, with the message delivered that unity is now crucial. Labour's Kelvin Davis is keeping quiet on whether he will be seeking to become Deputy Prime Minister in the next term of government. Mr Davis is currently Deputy Leader of the party, making him the most obvious candidate. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, hasn't made any promises, only committing to his job as Deputy Leader being safe. South Australia has opened its borders to New Zealanders effectively immediately, and 12 recent arrivals in hotel quarantine will be allowed into the community. New Zealand travellers can now enter South Australia without having to quarantine. It joins New South Wales and Northern Territory in allowing Kiwis free entry. The GCSB won't comment on its potential involvement in a US investigation that's led to 6 Russian military intelligence officers being charged over high-profile cyber attacks. The US Justice Department name-dropped New Zealand as one of the governments that provided assistance in the investigation. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint, and it's time now for the business news with Nicholas Poynton, who is in our Wellington studio. Nicholas, there appears to be a light at the end of the tunnel for businesses.
Yeah, there does indeed. Business confidence, as I'm sure we are all well aware, has been in the doldrums for quite some time due to the prevailing uncertainty that's been brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. But, that isn't really that new. But what is new is the latest results we got from the, bear with me with this, the New Zealand Institute's Economic Research's quarterly survey of business opinion. And yes, it shows that 40% of firms expect conditions to get worse over the near term, but that is a 20-point improvement over the previous survey from the, I think that was the June quarter. So yeah, look, it also found that firms were reporting a boost in trading this quarter, bringing it to levels that were last seen 2 years ago. There were, however, some dull spots in this report. As I was talking about last night, the services sector has shown up in this survey, and it appears to be the most pessimistic of all industries out there. But what I thought was a real positive, one thing that's really important to take away from this, was that there was a substantial improvement in the employment outlook as more firms are looking to hire more staff. And this sort of makes sense as we come towards the end of the year. We move closer to summer. We can expect there'll be a high demand for workers, especially in the horticultural sector, as they'll need people to go out there and pick fruit and vegetable. And all this has really led the Institute's principal economist to say that right now the economy is on track for the all-important V-shaped recovery.
So, Nicholas, the home of the Whopper. Well, it's got a new home, apparently.
Yes, well, look, Burger King lovers will be buoyed to learn that the receivers for the company, for the fast food chain, have managed to find a new buyer. So back in April, the owners of the franchise, they were put into receivership, owing more than $65 million as its backer pulled out. The operating company which runs Burger King, they were not put into receivership, but there was a need to find a buyer. So today, after 6 long months, the receivers announced that Tahua Partners, which currently owns the Starbucks brand, they will be purchasing the operating company, that's Antara's restaurant group, for an undisclosed sum. So look, even if you don't like Burger King's burgers, this is a rare example of a positive business news story at the moment, because it gives us Because this announcement, finding a buyer, it does give a degree of certainty to the business. It's 1,800 staff across 78 stores, the suppliers, and those who do love their burgers. And I should look to add that this is somewhat impressive for the receivers, given that they managed to find a buyer in the midst of a global pandemic.
And Nicholas, give us a quick spin around the markets before you head off.
Yeah, sure. Look, the NZX Top 50, it is up by 0.2% by about 76 points to 12,462. Our dollar is trading at 65.8 US cents, 93.4 Australian, 50.8 British pence. And gold is really living up to its status as a safe haven. It's unchanged at $1,900 US an ounce.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business update. The Deputy Prime Minister job is up for grabs and there are plenty of contenders. Jacinda Ardern says Kelvin Davis's role as Deputy Leader of the party is safe, but won't say whether that translates to Deputy Prime Minister. And Grant Robertson and Andrew Little haven't ruled themselves out either. Our political reporter Joe Moyer has this story.
It was all cheers and celebrations when the Labour Party caucus met for the first time this morning following its election night triumph. But on their way in, the big question was who will be anointed Deputy Prime Minister. Kelvin Davis is the obvious candidate as Deputy Leader, but he was batting away questions on the topic.
Roles and responsibilities are yet to be decided, so I'm not going to go into any conversations about that with you.
The Prime Minister isn't making any promises either, only committing to his job as Deputy Leader being safe.
When it comes to the deputy leadership within the Labour Party, I had no intent of changing that. However, keep in mind, all of the role allocation I will work through over the next 2 weeks, and those do go to a vote with our caucus.
Jacinda Ardern expects to wrap up cooperation talks with the Green Party next week, but it will be the week after that before ministerial posts, including Deputy Prime Minister, are made public. Grant Robertson is one of the most influential caucus members and is close to Ms Ardern. He wasn't ruling out Deputy PM either.
I'm the Minister of Finance. I'm really excited about getting another 3 years at that, and the Minister of Sport and Recreation, I hope, if I get that job as well. And so, that's my focus. Those issues are ones that the PM deals with.
Andrew Little, the man who stepped aside as Labour leader in 2017 for Ms Ardern, was complimentary of Kelvin Davis.
He's a very solid, very hard worker. And we have very diverse caucus, and he'd be an excellent Deputy Prime Minister.
But asked if he'd like to be Deputy Prime Minister, he couldn't quite bring himself to say no.
This is a matter for the Prime Minister and others, it's not for me.
Tamaki Makaurau MP Peeni Henare is part of the Labour Māori caucus, and he thinks his old school teacher is the right man for the job.
I have nothing but respect and full confidence in Kelvin Davis.
So yes, he should be?
Well, he was my Form 2 teacher. I think he'd make a great Deputy Prime Minister.
Willie Jackson was campaign chair for the Labour Māori caucus and says Kelvin Davis has full support for Deputy Prime Minister.
There's huge support for Kelvin from all members, and we're yet to make. He's yet to make that decision. The Māori caucus will support whatever Kelvin wants to do.
There are a lot of other jobs up for grabs too, and with New Zealand First being knocked out, all eyes are on who will be made Foreign Affairs Minister. Former Prime Minister Helen Clark told RNZ Phil Twyford could have the right background, having worked internationally with Oxfam. But Mr Twyford isn't so convinced.
No, I don't have any aspirations in that area.
Ms Clark also name-checked David Parker and Andrew Little. Again, Mr Little didn't rule it out.
These are decisions for the Prime Minister once the caucus is approved who's going to be in Cabinet.
Over the next 2 weeks, Ms Ardern will meet with all of her MPs, both old and new, to work out who will form her new cabinet, wider executive and other senior roles. With 64 to choose from, she has plenty of options. That could leave little left for Green Party MPs, who will be hoping some ministerial experience from the last government is on their side when it comes to jobs being dished out. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
And just a hand, we have a statement from Air Commodore Darren Webb, who's the head of Managed Isolation and Quarantine. Now, this is in response to the news that there is a cluster of cases within an isolation facility in Christchurch. It says the facility is well set up to respond and is working with local health authorities. Goes on to say this is an example of our managed isolation and quarantine system working as it should. We have planned for this and we have confidence in our systems. As a precaution, the facility, which is the Sedema Hotel in Christchurch, has been locked down with guests confined to their rooms while preparations for quarantining is undertaken. Additional security and nursing staff will be deployed and a special staff testing station will be established. This is to ensure safeguards are in place for staff and returnees. The workforce at this facility are dedicated to this site and do not work at other sites, the statement says. It goes on to say the hotel functions as both an isolation and quarantine facility and operates constantly at alert level 4 environment with protocols approved by public health and infection prevention specialists to ensure the safety of staff and returnees, including physical distancing, regular and thorough cleaning and strict adherence to health guidelines, comprehensive information and guidance on PPE use such as masks and gloves, and basic hygiene practices and daily health checks. That is from Air Commodore Darren Webb, who is the head of Managed Isolation and Quarantine. The Māori Party's Rawiri Waititi, donning his cowboy hat and a giant punamu necklace, touched down at Parliament today for the first time since winning the Wairiki electorate. He narrowly beat Labour's Tamati Coffey for the seat in a nail-biting finish, winning by just over 400 votes. If Waititi comes out on top after the special votes are counted, he'll return the Māori Party to Parliament. He told our reporter, Te Aniwa Hurihanganui, walking into Parliament was daunting, and now he knows what it feels like for Pākehā walking onto a marae.
Well, I've walked in here before in other capacities, but in a capacity where we have the privilege and the honour of representing your people, there's a sense of pride and also excitement, but there's also there's anxiousness because, you've got to go think, now I know how a Pākehā feels on the marae.
So a bit daunting?
Yeah, well, it is a bit daunting because they've got different tikanga. But we've just got to ensure we stay true to ourselves, we stay true to our kaupapa, and we stay true to our people. That's the most important thing.
You stand out a little bit with your mataoro, your full face moko in this place.
Yes.
Do you feel alone?
Never alone. There's a kōrero at home, ko tahi taku huata ki hauruia, he mano. So with one swipe of the core, I take out thousands of people. So what that means is actually, we stand on the shoulder of our tipuna of giants, but we carry the dreams and aspirations of our tamariki mokopuna. So no, never alone.
Are you nervous about the special votes?
Look, whatever happens, the Māori the rejuvenation of our Māori movement is well and truly in play. Because we're lucky enough to have one in here now, come 2023 there's going to be a huge challenge on and it's game on, and you will see more Māoris who have an independent Māori voice and an unapologetic Māori voice sitting in the chamber.
If you are elected as the Waiariki candidate, what impact do you want to have in this place in Parliament?
Oh, well, there'll be the impacts I would like to make are systemic impacts and push back against what I believe are tikanga that are foreign to our people. So watch this space, and our job is to hold the Māori caucus of the Labour Party accountable and to ensure that we put pressure on that Labour government to ensure that they deliver what Māori deserve. One thing is that if you're the deputy leader of a party that's just taken the majority vote, we expect you to be the deputy prime minister, Pēni Hianari to be the minister of health, Meka Whaitiri to be reinstated to her ministerial portfolios. We expect nothing less, and if they are not sitting in those positions, then we will be questioning why, and that to me would be turning their back on Māoridom once again.
Where did you get your cowboy hat?
Oh, this is a Kubra, so it's an Australian brand. I'd love a New Zealand brand, but I don't. So I usually wear Kubra Stetson, which is an American brand. But the reason why I wear the hat is our part of the country, Sea Company, we're known as Ngā Kaupoi. Yep. And so this is an acknowledgement of my kraua that went to war.
Yep, and the coasties, right?
Yes, all the coasties, and also acknowledging our kuia that stayed home to look after the farms and do all the mahi and look after the whānau. So there's a reason why I wear this hat. Yeah, it's not just because it makes me good looking.
And that was the Māori Party's Rawiri Waititi speaking there to Te Aniwa Huri Hanganui. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Crown has wrapped up its case against a man accused of physically and sexually abusing his ex-girlfriend. The man, who is in his 20s, is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to 8 charges, including sexual violation and threatening to kill. His defence lawyer cross-examined the complainant today, scrutinising why the woman now recalls more violence than she initially told the police. Our court reporter Annika Smith filed this story.
Yesterday, the court heard the complainant told police the man had been violent around 10 times during their 6-month relationship. However, under cross-examination by the man's lawyer, Belinda Sellers QC, today, she told the court it was more like twice a week. Ms. Sellers pressed her on this difference today, asking why she was now recalling more violence.
So, there were only 10 times?
Could have been 10. Could have been 20. It happened so many times I lost count.
Justice Brewer interrupted the cross-examination to ask the woman to explain the difference again.
The point really is why the difference between what you wrote in your statement back then and what you're saying now. I think that's what Ms. Sellers is getting at.
Yeah.
So,
I think as you uncover trauma through counselling, things pop up and things that you've shoved so far down inside of you come up.
Ms. Sellers asked the woman why she stayed, notwithstanding the alleged violence, if the man owed her money, went out drinking and openly flirted with other women in front of her.
You were still wanting to stay together, is that correct?
Yes, because I wanted him to stop hurting me.
hurting you emotionally?
Emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually.
I accept that there was emotional and mental.
Yes.
But I'm suggesting there wasn't physical or sexual.
There was physical and sexual abuse.
This afternoon, the Crown called the woman's flatmate, who had lived with the pair when they were together, to give evidence. He told the court he mostly kept to himself in the flat, but did hear arguing and on one occasion loud noises coming from the garage.
I did hear what would have probably sounded like pushing and shoving and noises that weren't just, car doors opening or garage doors opening. It did sound like there was pushing and shoving and falling against things every now and then. But it was these times where I was half asleep and quite groggy from just waking up.
And again, hearing pushing and shoving, you wouldn't leave the room?
No, it wouldn't have been something I should have gotten myself involved in.
The woman has described to the police and now the court a period of escalating violence during her relationship with the defendant. Yesterday, she told the court the man almost killed her one night, chasing her around the house before holding her in a chokehold and forcing her to perform sexual acts on him. She said she penned a letter to the man to leave a paper trail in case he killed her.
I kept it to give to someone if I needed to, or if he went through with his threats to kill me, that it would be found.
The Crown and Defence will give their closing statements in the case tomorrow morning. It's expected Justice Brewer will reserve his decision. Atu i te ko Timatua ko Annika Smith-Aho.
The auntie of a Samoan man who died in a crash yesterday says her nephew's death should be a lesson for other drivers on the road. The horror accident happened yesterday on the highway between Napier and Taupo, which police have described as one of the country's most lethal roads. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
A convoy of 3 vans of seasonal workers from Hastings were travelling to Taupo for a holiday, but tragedy struck. At a turn-off to the Tarawera Cafe, a popular stop along the road, one of the vans collided with a truck. 37-year-old Tino Tangielima was a passenger in the van and died at the scene. His aunt, Lofa Tui Mungalunga, says her brother, Tino's father, called her distraught yesterday afternoon.
Before I know it was Tino, I've been watching the video clip that people share on social media for about 10 times, not knowing it was Tino that died, until my brother rang me and he was crying on the phone saying it was his son. I tried to hold the tears but I was lost. I was totally lost.
She says other drivers must be careful on State Highway 5.
Whatever happened to Tino is going to be a lesson for all the drivers to be more careful on the road, especially entering the road because all the cars are too fast on the road. So just more careful on the road, that's all I can say.
8 people were injured, including 2 critically. The truck driver came away unscathed. In Hastings, the community is offering support to the grieving workers. Assemblies of God King's House Church Minister Ailalau Fali Tutulu says a prayer meeting was held last night for the man's colleagues.
So far we have a couple of ministers that went out there with a few of our key men to sort of have a service, have a prayer and talk with them and encourage them with the situation, trying to stabilize their thinking so they can stop worrying, and which is really hard at the moment, really hard.
He says the man's colleagues will be supported by local families and will have time off work.
Be there present and let them know that we care, and anything that we can do for them while they are in this state of mind, that's all we can do for now.
The Managing Director of Thornhill Horticultural Contracting, Richard Bibby, says the workers going on holiday had been working for the company for nearly a year, when usually they'd only work for 7 months.
It was just a bit of a thank you to them, to give them a bit of time out and do some of the touristy things that us Kiwis can do. So, just having a relaxing time before they get back into the new season.
Richard Bibby says Tino had been with his company for 7 years and described him as a leader, a fun and engaging man who impressed everyone.
He's just a really good guy, and he was just, as their accommodation, he's one of the one of the souls of it. So the pastoral care people that are in our accommodation are just absolutely distraught with what's happened.
Mr Bibby says Tino has young children and he's working to contact the man's family in Samoa. In Hastings for Checkpoint, Tom Kitchen.
President Trump has launched a scathing attack on his top infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, calling him an idiot and a disaster. Mr. Trump says if he'd taken Dr. Fauci's advice, there would have been more than 500,000 deaths in the US. As it stands, 220,000 people have now died from COVID in the US, and the country has reported more than 8.1 million cases. CNN's Jim Acosta reports.
With Election Day fast approaching, President Trump sounds like he's running not against Democrat Joe Biden, but against the man who's arguably the nation's most trusted health expert on the coronavirus, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I don't want to hurt him. He's been there for about 350 years.
The president began his day of attacks on Fauci on a call with campaign staffers.
People are tired of COVID. I have the biggest rallies. People are saying whatever. Just leave us alone. They're tired of it. People are tired of hearing Fauci and all these idiots. Fauci's a disaster. If I listened to him, we'd have 500,000 deaths.
Fauci got under the president's skin appearing on 60 Minutes, where the infectious diseases expert said he wasn't surprised when Mr. Trump contracted COVID-19.
I was worried that he was going to get sick when I saw him in a completely precarious situation of crowded, no separation between people, and almost nobody wearing a mask. Nothing good can come out of that. That's got to be a problem. And then sure enough, it turned out to be a super spreader event.
Drawing thousands of supporters who aren't wearing masks, the president is on an anti-science crusade at his rallies, accusing Biden of siding with the experts on the virus.
Biden wants to lock it down. He wants to listen to Dr. Fauci. He'll listen to the scientists. If I listened totally to the scientists, we would right now have a country that would be in a massive depression.
Biden responded to that charge of listening to the scientists with one word on Twitter: yes. Contrast that with Fauci, who says he's been muzzled by the White House.
You know, I think there has been a restriction, John, but it doesn't, it isn't consistent.
The president snapped back at that remark, too.
He gets a lot of television. He loves being on television, and we let him do it. Sometimes he says things that are a little bit off, and they get built up, unfortunately.
But sources have told CNN for weeks that the president has opted to listen to the questionable advice coming from another doctor on the coronavirus task force, Scott Atlas, who tweeted a post that said, "Masks work? No." A comment removed by Twitter because it violated the social media platform's rules, as most experts believe masks are effective.
And that was the CNN's Jim Acosta. Australian wildlife experts are using drones to drop 40,000 gum tree seeds every day to help koalas survive and thrive after thousands died in recent wildfires. Gum tree leaves are the animal's main source of food, and the aim is to drop seeds from the air to help the destroyed bushland regenerate. The BBC's Stephanie Prentice has more.
Doing a little koala rescue. She's a mother with a baby. Just trying to collect as many live ones as we can.
Videos of koalas dying from burns, starvation and dehydration were widely circulated in the aftermath of the Australian bushfires this summer.
Poor little thing.
It's impossible to know how many died, but estimates say it could be 10% of the population, and the fires that incinerated habitats left many of those that survived with nowhere to go. Now authorities are trying to regenerate bushland and forests as quickly as possible to help a species that was already struggling with population numbers. Kelly Lee works for the Science for Wildfire Conservation Group.
So overall, the koalas have been declining for many years now, which is a real area of concern. In these protected areas, we found these populations that have been doing really well, young and growing populations, and the main threats to them have been fires. And for a few years now, we've always known it would be a threat here, but we saw something of a scale we'd never imagined happen last summer.
During the fires, helicopters were used to drop food to help starving animals, and now drones will drop seeds from above and strategically too in an attempt to create corridors of trees and to reach inaccessible areas. It's hoped the new habitats could eventually double the numbers of the marsupials. Dermot O'Gorman is CEO of the World Wildlife Fund Australia.
The goal is to repopulate native species, to restore degraded landscapes, to ensure sustainable agriculture and to build a more resilient Australia to deal with climate change and fire-related disasters.
The World Wildlife Fund is now seeking to raise $210 million to help pay for the programme.
And that was the BBC's Stephanie Prentice. Let's get to some of your feedback before the 6 o'clock news. On the outbreak and managed isolation, 11 confirmed cases at a hotel in Christchurch, 14 under investigation, believed to be fishing crews brought over from the Ukraine and Russia. This person says the Russian deep sea fishermen situation is worrying, but more shocking is that New Zealand hasn't trained enough people to fill the vacancies. Another person reckons it's a debacle that puts health and MIQ staff at risk. They say Martin says the fishing companies clearly only have one thing in mind. Sadly, our COVID-free status is not a high priority.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with tēnei. Russian fishing crew are at the centre of a COVID-19 outbreak in an isolation facility in Christchurch. The Ministry of Health has confirmed that 11 people have tested positive at the Sudima Hotel and 14 other cases are under investigation after routine day 3 testing. It says the fishing crew are the only guests at the hotel. Sea Lord is one of 3 fishing companies that brought in 237 workers on a chartered flight from Russia last Friday. Its chief executive, Doug Paulin, has told Checkpoint the fishing crew isolated for 14 days before leaving Russia.
That itself, of course, doesn't mean they won't get COVID-19, but it's a process we can put in place. They're all tested 3 days before getting on the plane, at which point in time, if anyone is shown to be positive, they, of course, are not able to join the charter flight.
Doug Paulin says the fishing industry will pay all the costs of quarantine. The police expect more people to come forward as part of an operation investigating sexual assault allegations in the Wellington region. Operation Emerald began yesterday after a flood of allegations emerged on social media against 3 Wellington musicians. They were accused of rape, sexual assault and other violent acts. The police say they have received a small number of complaints directly today and want people to contact them rather than make accusations on social media. Detective Senior Sergeant John Vanden Heuvel says about 12 detectives are working on the case. The National Party leader has emerged from a post-election caucus confident she has the backing of her whole team. It suffered a crushing defeat at the election and today farewelled 15 outgoing MPs. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson.
National's gone from a caucus of 54 down to 35 and could lose more after special votes are counted. MPs returned to Parliament today for a post-mortem and emotions were running high. Sorrow to be farewelling colleagues they didn't expect to lose and anger at the damage caused by leaks to the media during the campaign. Leader Judith Collins says she's confident she now has the backing of the caucus. Furthermore, she believes, or at least hopes, there won't be any more problems with leaks from the caucus. With the message delivered, unity is now crucial. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Labour's Kelvin Davis is keeping quiet on whether he will be seeking to become Deputy Prime Minister in the next term of government. Mr Davis is currently Deputy Leader of the party, making him the most obvious candidate. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern hasn't made any promises, only committing to his job as Deputy Leader being safe. Kelvin Davis is also batting away questions on the topic.
Roles and responsibilities are yet to be decided, so I'm not going to go into any conversations about that with you.
Labour's Deputy Leader Kelvin Davis. The Māori Party's Rawiri Waititi has touched down at Parliament for the first time since winning the Waiariki electorate. He narrowly beat Labour's Tamati Coffey for the seat in a nail-biting finish, winning by just over 400 votes. His place in Parliament isn't guaranteed, with special votes still to be counted, but he says whatever happens, the party will come back swinging next election. He says walking into Parliament today was exciting and daunting.
Now I know how a Pākehā feels on the marae. It's a bit daunting because I've got different tikanga. But we've just got to ensure we stay true to ourselves, we stay true to our kaupapa, and we stay true to our people. That's the most important thing.
The Māori Party's Rawiri Waititi. South Australia has opened its borders to Kiwis effectively immediately, and 12 recent arrivals in hotel quarantine will be allowed into the community. Our World Watch reporter Belina Lau has more.
New Zealand travellers can now enter South Australia without having to quarantine. It joins New South Wales and the Northern Territory in allowing Kiwis free entry. Yesterday, 5 travellers from New Zealand arrived unexpectedly at Adelaide Airport and were put into quarantine at their own expense. States. The Police Commissioner, Grant Stevens, says there are 12 New Zealanders in hotel quarantine who will soon be released. This decision follows the controversy surrounding dozens of Kiwis who travelled to the allowed states but went on to states which had opted out of the Trans-Tasman bubble. This is Perlina Lau.
Police say they're not involved with a small land occupation in the Bay of Islands town of Opua. 20 people have been occupying the empty site on Kellett Street since Saturday. They're trying to stop the construction of 17 houses by a developer after the commercial arm of the Far North District Council sold the land in March. Police say at this stage they're not immediately involved in the occupation but will continue to monitor the situation. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. 2 uncapped newcomers have been named in the All Blacks squad to travel to Australia. Wellington loose forward Duplessis Kurifi and Otago prop George Bauer are part of the 36-strong group flying out on Sunday. Both come in as injury cover, with the starting prop Joe Moody still going through concussion protocols, and the pair of loose forwards, Adi Savea and prop Nepo Laulala, taking paternity leave. Savea and Laulala are expected to head to Australia in the fortnight following the squad's arrival in Australia. The Silver Ferns defender Michaela Sokolic-Beatson is out of the team's domestic matches this week after rupturing an Achilles tendon for the second time in just 9 months. The 24-year-old who ruptured her right Achilles in January has suffered the same injury to her left leg at Ferns training last night. Meanwhile, Ferns coach Dame Nolene Taurua has a new contract in front of her but says she won't sign it until after next week's series against England. The World Cup winning coach says she still has more to do in New Zealand netball and wants to see some of her innovations through.
That's the intention, to embed all the things that we've been doing in regards to building the depth, but also I'd love to go another round, and I haven't experienced Commonwealth Games either, so that's the intention, to be here for another 3-4 years.
Dame Nolene Taurua. All 3 America's Cup challengers have now launched their second-generation AC-75 yachts, just days after American Magic and Ineos Team UK started trials with their new boats. Italian syndicate Luna Rossa today unveiled what skipper Max Serena says will be a monster on the water. That's the news.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Unlike air travel, shipping has probably not declined a great deal during the pandemic because we've continued with exports and we're continuing to import goods.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
6 topics up for discussion: fighting COVID-19, American families, race in America, climate change, national security and leadership.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland south to Waitomo, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine in Northland, cloudy with areas of light rain or drizzle in Waitomo, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Spreading north to Auckland and Coromandel tonight, becoming mainly fine by midday tomorrow, with scattered showers inland during the afternoon and evening. For Taranaki, Central North Island, High Country and Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy with areas of drizzle or light rain. Whanganui to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland except Stewart Island. Mainly fine, but areas of low cloud and drizzle near the east coast until midday tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, fine weather. Stewart Island and Fiordland, cloudy periods and a few showers. Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods, the odd shower possible overnight tonight. RNZ National, coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It was haere to a massive chunk of National's caucus today after the blue bath at the weekend. The party met today for its post-election mop-up and to say their goodbyes. National was plagued by pre-election leaks, leadership scuffles, a sexting scandal, COVID conspiracy claims, a budget bungle and allegations of fat-shaming by leader Judith Collins. As they leave the bear pit that is Parliament, National's MPs get the party's equivalent of a medal for participating, a silver tray for their service. Today, the queue of recipients was long.
This was a time for people that were leaving to reflect and be presented with a tray for their service. So there was no telling ops, no.
I'm chomping at the bit to be back here. So I'm your man if there's a by-election.
I've never in my 9 years disclosed any confidential information from the caucus.
Checkpoint caught up with 3 MPs who are packing up their offices and shipping out. First up, Lawrence Yule, former MP for Tukituki, a first-timer. class of 2017. But he's spent 2 decades in politics, local and national.
The leaking culture has been extremely damaging, and unless that stops, it's going to be pretty hard for the party to move on. That's my number one concern.
Were you emotional in that meeting? Were other people emotional?
No. I was a little bit emotional when I first stood up, but no, I wasn't emotional. Losing a seat is a difficult thing. I loved being the MP for Tuki. I was beaten on the night, and that's how it is. So you sort of grieve for a couple of days about what might have been, but it's done, and I'm very comfortable and happy today to move on and leave this place knowing that I'm pretty satisfied with what I did while I was here.
So, Lawrence, is the leaker still in caucus?
I have no idea. I have no idea who the leaker is. I have no idea whether there's more than one. I literally don't know.
Did caucus get a bit of a telling off from Judith Collins at all?
No. We get to say a few words and then present it with a silver tray and leave.
Okay, so this tray, now that you've brought it up, Lawrence, can you describe it to me?
Well, it's a silver tray. I haven't even opened it.
Oh, why haven't you opened it? I'm highly curious about this.
Yes, well, it's in a box. So
yeah.
I'll open it when I get to it. I've got to get all my stuff back to Hawke's Bay, and I haven't actually looked at it yet. And I'm gone. Basically, that's how it works. It is brutal, but they have to make way for new people and new government. And it may be sort of an obvious thing to say, but I haven't written a CV for about 20 years because my employment contract has been coming up every 3 years, and people have made the judgment. This time I didn't win the race, so now I actually have to put pen to paper and update my CV.
Well, Lawrence, and this is not a joke, it's going to be a cracker of a summer in your part of the world. You might want to just spend the summer picking some fruit and chilling out, deciding what you're going to do.
Well, all those things are possible. Do some DIY, see my grandchildren. Whether I get into picking fruit, I don't know. I haven't thought about that yet.
Dan Bidouar, a latecomer, didn't even manage a full term. He made it across the line in the 2018 Northcote by-election, winning Jonathan Coleman's old seat. He explains what he said in his farewell speech at the closed-door post-mortem meeting.
What I've said, Lisa, is simply that to position ourselves for 2023, we've got to make sure we've got a high-performing culture. That means no leaking and I think team discipline. The second area is really around making sure we do select the best and brightest candidates that represent our values to stand for national. And thirdly, that I think that our ideas and our messaging reflects the concerns and aspirations of New Zealanders.
You sound pretty cheery for a guy who's lost his job. Are you not angry about what's happened?
No, I'm not. I'm young and I'm hopeful that national... if we get it right, we'll come through this. And I'm just excited, Lisa, about the future that I will play in that, hopefully.
How was Judith Collins in that room?
I think, Judith was, of course, reflecting the mood of everybody in that room, which is disappointed and sad to lose colleagues and talent.
Does she give you guys a telling off?
No, no telling off.
Dan, have you been looking at situations vacant in butchery, or are you planning to branch out?
Well, I've got many different hats. It's a brilliant thing about the National Party is most of my colleagues come from the private sector, and you've just mentioned one career that I've had, but I'm also an economist. I was previously a senior executive at Foodstuff, so I'm exploring. I'm quite keen to get back in the private sector for a bit. Get married to my beautiful fiancée, Courtney Simpson. And then position us well for victory in 2023.
I'm wondering about the party president, Peter Goodfellow. Should he go?
Peter's a fantastic person to have at the helm, and I fully support Peter.
Hey, what did they give you, Dan? What's your farewell gift?
I actually haven't looked at it yet, but it's a silver tray.
Alfred Naro, class of 2011, New Zealand's first MP of Cook Islands descent and a former minister. And today, a bit down when we called.
It is sad. I mean, I've been here for 9 years and journeyed with a number of people over that period of time, made some, lasting friendships, and felt that, we've achieved a lot in that period of time, and, it wasn't to be. So it is sad.
You're sounding quite flat, Alfred.
Oh, well, absolutely. As I said, it is a sad day. It's sad for, the friendships that have developed. It's sad that you've invested 9 years of your life, taking away time from your family to be here. So, yeah, no.
Who are you going to miss the most?
There's no one person, there's lots. I mean, I'm friends obviously with Mark Mitchell. Him and I are best mates down here. Melissa Lee, a number of people who I've grown, really fond of.
Is this it for you and politics, Alfred? Or do you think there is space for another party? Will you consider that again?
Well, they say never. So I think for me at the moment, I'm looking forward to going and mowing my lawns for a start, cleaning my garage, having a sleep, spending some time with family. And
Have you cleaned up your office?
Well, I've sat down. I've had to stop and start because I've had so many people coming in and out. So you take the time to sit with them and share a few thoughts and have a cup of tea, and then so slowly getting there.
People might not know because, they look at you and you're a politician, right? But you had a life before politics. You're an electrician. You were an electrician. So you've got some skills, Alfred. Are you thinking you might go back to something like that or totally different?
Well, yeah, I did start off as an electrician and, was a sole trader. Then I did some contracting. But I also did a theological degree, so pastored a church, ran a trust, and then also did some consulting around community development.
Any regrets?
No regrets. No. Like I said, just honoured. Look, I'm honoured to have, under the National Party, to be the first Kiwi of Cook Island descent to become Member of Parliament, and now we've got 3.
And that is outgoing National MP Alfred Ngaro there. The Ministry of Social Development has revealed more than 60% of the money it has spent on settling historic abuse claims has gone on operational costs, legal aid and external legal fees. The Ministry told the Royal Commission into Abuse and Care it's received just over 4,000 claims and has resolved just under half of them. Our reporter Andrew McRae is at the Royal Commission hearing in Auckland.
Only about 23 of the $77 million spent on historic abuse claims has been paid in compensation to the 1,900 claimants who've settled with the Ministry of Social Development. Meanwhile, more than 2,000 claims remain unresolved, with about 40 new ones coming in each month. MSD Deputy Chief Executive for Policy Simon McPherson was asked if it's acceptable 54% of claims are still outstanding.
No, it's frustrating, obviously. The new process introduced in 2018 is actually intended to actually expedite dealing with claims and resolving more of them. I mean, it hasn't yet delivered on that result, but I think we're confident it will do.
He says money budgeted for the claims process has gone up and more could be expected.
But it reflects a significant commitment, I think, from the government to actually attempt to resolve claims and to resolve more of them. So it's still a reduction in the budget. It's for a 3-year period, and it's quite possible to see that increased at the end of that period or during the period if we make good progress.
He says around $105 million is set aside for historic claims over the next 3 years. Figures up until October last year show 54% of claimants are Māori, 71% men and 28% women. Mr McPherson says there's a common theme among claimants.
That many claimants have low income, health or mental health difficulties finding or retaining work, are transient, and some have been in prison at some point since leaving state care. Many claimants attribute the difficulties they have faced to their experiences as a child in state care.
He says the claims process, while managed by MSD, is robust and doesn't favour the ministry.
The job of the social workers in the claims team is to help resolve claims, not to, in a sense, try and cover things up or defend the department or its predecessors. Social workers also have professional obligations themselves in terms of how they act. I don't think some sort of dumb law to the organisation would be some overriding driver here, but the organisation has not set the historic claims team up simply to protect the department.
It's known at least 200 children were physically and sexually abused while patients at the Lake Ellis Psychiatric Hospital in the 1970s. The Health Ministry was responsible for them at the time, but the Ministry's Chief Legal Advisor, Philip Knipe, admits they still don't have an accurate figure of the number who passed through the adolescent unit.
Cran's view is in terms of a lot has been taken or undertaken to enable people to come forward, and we continue to deal with new claims where they come in.
He agreed with counsel assisting the Commission that while the Ministry of Health had a settlement process, accessing information on it's difficult, including no reference to it on the MOH website.
And as I acknowledged in terms of material has been drafted, agree it hasn't been posted, but there are lots of other avenues by which it is brought to individuals' attention. So it's something we can improve, but I disagree with your statement that it's a gaping hole in the process. Yep.
Mr Knipe says the Crown's strategy was to settle claims where there was a good evidential basis to do so. Claims wouldn't be settled simply because it was more economic to do so, and claims that couldn't be settled would be defended in court. For Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
South Canterbury and North Otago farmers are on the precipice of a drought, and NIWA's latest hotspot report shows they have the driest soils in the South Island. Alicia Foon has more.
It's tough going for South Canterbury and North Otago farmers like Timaru-based dairy and deer farmer Kelly Hudson, who was wishing for rain.
The early spring is a pretty crucial time, and this year we just seem to have missed out on virtually any rain at all just around this Timaru area. But South Canterbury, North Otago is pretty generally affected, and dry times coincided with our spring production, so it has the potential to have a fairly big impact if it continues.
He says spring is supposed to be harvest time, but farmers are feeding grain, destocking and looking for alternative grazing.
We've sold some store stock, we've sold some store cattle at a time that we wouldn't normally do so. We've also put a fair number of our young deer out of the province on grazing, and we've been feeding supplementary feed through September, October to our stags.
He has only seen 250 millimetres of annual rainfall on his patch, when it's usually about 630 millimetres. NIWA meteorologist Chris Brandolino says the dry theme has been troublesome, and there's more to come.
Unfortunately, when we look at the upcoming 3-month period, so that includes October, November, and December through the calendar year, we're tipping that rainfall will either be near normal or below normal for the South Island as a whole, except for the West Coast where we think below normal rainfall. We really need rainfall from the heavens to get into the ground because that limits the irrigation but also replenishes the streams and rivers so that if you do have to irrigate, there's water there.
Federated Farmers South Canterbury President Jason Grant, who has several farms in the area, says there's not enough rain to make the soil damp enough to carry them till Christmas.
Yeah, some parts of South Canterbury are in real dire straits. The southern part of South Canterbury down near Wairunga and into North Otago, bottom of Waimate, they're almost in drought qualification at the moment, really, just about there. I suppose the only consolation is that we sort of live in hope that we still will get some rainfalls before Christmas. December can be quite a wet month in South Canterbury, even though it gets pretty warm as well. So, yeah, we're sort of holding out hope that we do get some rainfalls. But if we don't, going through Christmas right into summer, it'd be really interesting.
The Ministry for Primary Industries is monitoring dry conditions in the area. The Waimate and Waitaki districts have received little rain since autumn, making pasture covers low for this time of year. Waimate Mayor Craig Rowley says it's tough for the community.
It can be quite devastating, obviously, a drought for the farming community. We are an agricultural support town, so we rely on our farmers in the district. So if their income's down, it means that they don't spend money within the district, so it has an effect, a flow-on effect right through the district. It's quite unusual because if you drive through town, it looks green and lush with the grass growing, but as soon as you get into those foothills, it's very dry. So it will have an effect on quite a large number of farmers, particularly in those foothill areas.
He's encouraging farmers to use the rural support services on offer or to get in touch with him directly. If farmers are feeling stressed or needing advice, they can call 0800 Rural Help. For Checkpoint, ko Alicia Foon, Tēnei.
It is 23 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Countries across Europe are making difficult decisions about the coronavirus outbreak as cases surge across the continent. Lauren Anthony reports.
Europe's second coronavirus wave is forcing some countries to go even deeper into restrictions again, as worldwide cases crossed 40 million on Monday. About 6 million people in the UK face tougher lockdowns in the coming days. Wales is set to go into what it calls a firebreak lockdown from Friday until early November, where all but essential workers must stay home and non-essential businesses must close. A lockdown could also hit Manchester within days, although the city is still fighting the national government over the economic impact.
Time is of the essence.
Ireland, meanwhile, plans to bring in decisive nationwide COVID-19 restrictions on Monday, but will stop short of reintroducing a full lockdown. In Belgium, all bars and restaurants are set to close for 4 weeks as hospitals edge towards a bed shortage. And in Italy, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has given mayors the power to shut public spaces from 9 p.m. to halt gatherings, as he unveiled a further package of measures over the weekend to try and halt a sharp rise in cases. He insisted the government was determined to avoid a repeat of the lockdown imposed at the start of the crisis in March. Currently, Milan is the country's hardest hit region. Experts believe the true numbers of both cases and deaths internationally are likely to be much higher, given deficiencies in testing and potential underreporting by some countries.
And to the US now, where early voting has begun in Florida, a battleground state that could decide the November 3rd US presidential election. A record 30 million Americans have already cast ballots nationwide, with barely 2 weeks to go. Here's Chris Dignam.
Everybody needs to get out and vote.
President Donald Trump on Monday told crowds at back-to-back rallies in Arizona to vote early.
Return your absentee ballot or vote. You know, you can go out there, I think, today. When do you do it? Today, tomorrow, whatever.
Early voting began on October 7th in the battleground state, where the Republican president's Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, has a narrow lead, according to recent opinion polls.
You don't have events like this and you come in second in Arizona, okay? You don't do that.
But Trump showed characteristic self-confidence in describing the state of the race, amid signs that Democrats are leading the surge in early voting.
Because our people like to go out and vote, right? They like to vote.
Nearly 30 million Americans have already cast early ballots in the 2020 election, more than 21% of the overall total in 2016, as voters this year sought to avoid potentially large crowds on November 3rd. Polls opened to early voting in the crucial battleground state of Florida on Monday. A Reuters Ipsos survey of the state showed Biden with 49% of the support and Trump with 47%. At a drive-in rally in Orlando, Biden's running mate, Kamala Harris, made a breathless appeal for early votes.
Healthcare justice is on the ballot in 2020. Reproductive justice is on the ballot in 2020. Criminal justice reform is on the ballot in 2020. Climate reform is on the ballot in 2020. Everything is on the ballot in 2020. Joe Biden is on the ballot in 2020.
Biden was off the campaign trail on Monday as he prepped for Thursday's high-stakes debate, but he made a brief appearance in his home state of Delaware, stopping to talk to police officers after taping an interview with 60 Minutes at Wilmington's Queen Theater. With nearly 2 weeks to go until Election Day, Biden holds a wide lead in national opinion polls, but in many battleground states where the election is likely to be decided, the race is much tighter.
Cold water swimming could hold a clue to a possible dementia cure. Cambridge University scientists have discovered a protein that's been shown to slow the onset of dementia in mice that swim in the winter. The BBC's Justin Relay explains.
Fancy a dip? Yes, in cold water.
Oh, it's warm, yeah. Oh! Well, we're from the north, so we can handle it.
So why might this help protect against dementia? The answer is a latent hibernation ability prompted by getting cold that it seems human beings retain. When animals hibernate, they lose some of the connections between their brain cells, but they are miraculously reformed when they wake in the spring, thanks in part to a protein discovered by the Cambridge University team.
Which is where this place, Hampstead Heath at Lido, comes in.
The scientists wanted to know if our bodies produce the same protein and needed a group of people who regularly get very cold.
Heat isn't probably as good for you as cold in that way.
After 3 years of winter blood tests, the subjects of the trial are gathered beside the chilly pool to hear the results of Professor Malucci's work.
We compared you to a bunch of people doing Tai Chi who didn't get cold, and none of them get increased levels of this protein, but many of you did. So what does it tell us? It tells us that cold does induce this protein in humans. You are the first sort of non-patient cohort to show that cold water swimming raises this protective protein, which is pretty cool.
But remember, winter swimming can be really dangerous if you're not used to it or have an underlying illness. So do be careful.
So we're never going to cure it.
The challenge now is to find a drug that stimulates the production of the protein in humans and, of course, to prove it really does help delay dementia.
If you slowed the progress of dementia by even a couple of years on a whole population, that would have an enormous impact economically and health-wise.
The link between cold water and dementia is a very promising line of research, but don't expect results soon. There is, the scientists say, lots more work to be done before it yields a potential treatment.
And that report from the BBC, that's all we've got time for this evening. Anna Thomas and the First Up team will be back with you at Sparrows tomorrow. That's 5 a.m. You can check out all our stories online, and we're back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Russian fishing crew members are at the centre of a COVID-19 outbreak in an isolation facility in Christchurch. There are calls for anyone with information regarding sexual assault allegations in the Wellington music community to come forward. The national leader says volunteers and supporters will all have a say in the review into the weekend's heavy election defeat. And New Zealanders can now travel to South Australia, with officials in the state opening up its borders to Kiwis today. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, Trevor Reekie chats with and features the music of English singer-songwriter Michael Kiwanuka. We kick off a new BBC series on how climate change is putting some nations on edge with each other, including a new Cold War in the Arctic. Well, it would be a Cold War, not as cold as it used to be, which will go well with